to, and if they're willing to keep that open for you. And then the last one is war propaganda. As long as Moscow, Leningrad, and or Stalingrad are Soviet possessed, USSR receives +1 wartime income per each of these land zones. So, just to clarify, Leningrad, Moscow, Stalingrad. Those are the important ones for you to start getting to get up to $3 extra a turn. So all told, really, their wartime bonuses don't amount to a whole lot. Really, I think they're on the smaller end, even excluding the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. That's only a total of +5. I think Italy can get up to 6. So they don't get a whole lot of wartime bonus income. However, Leningrad, Moscow, and Stalingrad, each one of those cities is not going to be easy to take. So that's a pretty safe income bonus for them. Whereas the Arctic Convoy line is probably going to be pretty easy comparatively, or much easier for the German player to keep shut down. So, yeah, wartime bonuses income for Russia aren't huge, but they're pretty straightforward. So now we're going to go on to Soviet special abilities. So factory movement. Once at war with a major power, USSR may use 1 rail to move a minor or medium factory and 2 rail moves to move a major factory. The factory cannot produce any units or tech the turn it moves. It moves in whatever state of damage it has suffered. It must be in and remain inside Soviet home country. So, right off the bat, and I don't have the actual setup put on the board. I thought it would kind of get in the way of pointing out some of the zones. But there's a major factory here, major factory here. I believe I know there's a factory in Stalingrad. I can't remember I think it's a minor. A minor here, and a major here. Now, the obvious ones you're going to probably want to move right off the bat when you get the chance, if you plan on moving them, are going to be probably, one of these 3 or these 2, and then this one on another turn, because this one in Uralkursk is kind of exposed. It's not in a city. It's a little harder to defend because of that. On the other hand, the ones in Smolensk and Kiev are closer to the front, but then they're in a city, so they get the defensive bonuses. The units within the city will, in theory, get the defensive bonuses of the city, and they'll be a little harder to hold. Leningrad is probably comparatively safe because Leningrad starts off as a fortified zone, and it already starts off with a major factory, and just the nature of the map makes it actually it's just a little farther than it seems once you start counting out spaces. It's also a little hard to surround because it's got a port and an airfield, and you're going to have Finland come back and take Karjala at some point to be able to effectively surround it, in addition to Karelia and then all these other territories. So Leningrad's not easy to take. And of course, Stalingrad is already much farther away from the front, and Moscow is going to be heavily defended just because of the nature of it being Moscow. So where to move your factories? Now, historically, they kind of came back here to the Ural Mountains. But I actually have been thinking about this, and I think that a good place to move your factories, if you're going to move your factories, because you don't have to, might actually be here to North Caucasia or Transcaucasia. The reason being is you're already going to want to really defend this area. Now, let's say that the Germans do a really good job pushing in, and you're like, well, okay, I can get a factory out. Well, I'm going to move it here, and I'm going to start building another firewall right here to keep them out of Transcaucasia. So that's probably where I would move at least one of the factories that I'm going to move if I'm going to move the factories. Do you have to move the factories? No. But you also run the risk then of them falling into German hands. And one of the biggest problems for the Germans is all their real production is back here. Their next closest production points are here and here, but they're minor factories. Even with the factory improvement, they either, then they become 2 units there and 2 units here. And if they want more than that, they got to start building more minor factories, which is more investment in infrastructure rather than units. So they would love to get their hands on factories actually in the Russian territories, so that they can start pumping out some units there. Even if it's only one per turn, that could be a big game changer for them, not having to ship their guys constantly over and over. So would I destroy a factory that I think... So let me put it this way. If I think a factory's got a decent shot of falling into German hands, I'm probably going to use their other ability, Scorched Earth, and just blow it up. Assuming I can't move it. So now there's other places you could move them. Now there's also Novobrisk back here, which puts them way away from the front, and they're going to be relatively safe. But on the other hand, now you've got to really start railing your stuff up here, and it's even the faster units can only go up to here. So I wouldn't move it too far away. I might... Another good spot would probably be here in Ural, which is historically where they put it, because at least here in this territory, they're behind the... better defended by this mountain range. So any attackers are coming, have to get through the mountain range, so it makes it a little bit easier to defend. Same thing with Orenburg. And these territories are actually close enough where you can actually get to Moscow and or down to Stalingrad in a way that isn't going to take you forever to get there compared to Novobrisk. Or Tinkelgrad, as I like to call it. So that's the... that's kind of my assessment of the factory thing. Now obviously you can pick anywhere in all that red to move your factories. So I'm sure there are arguments for other spots as well, and they're probably all valid. So that's just kind of my thought process on where I would move the factories. Is I would look at North Caucasia and the Ural or Orenburg areas as my first stops. But you could also just move them all back into Moscow as well. It doesn't, there's no limit on the number of factories you can have in a territory, or a land zone, excuse me. So then there's now I'm going to go and just jump to Scorched Earth because it fits already with what I've been talking about. Russia can destroy its own facilities during the combat phase of its turn. No land unit is required. Now, and as we saw in General Hand Grenade's video a couple weeks ago, he clarified that railroads count as facilities. So you can blow up railroads, all over the place. You can blow up airstrips. You can blow up all the ports, all the shipyards, anything that counts as a facility. The Russians on its combat turn basically just blow up. Now, I wouldn't go hog wild with that because you still need rail to get units to the front. You might pull the trigger a little early in one of those forward cities and blow up the airfield, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh man, I wish I'd kept that open. Now we can surround it a lot easier and get in and take the city, even though I put a little bit of effort in defending it. Again, it's a timing thing, and I would just be careful. If you wait too long, Germany can get it. If you pull the trigger too early, you're screwing up your defense and making it easier for them to take it. At least in the case of like the airfields, and then in the case of the railroads, you could hamstring yourself in a way where now you've got all your units need to slog back into that territory on foot rather than being able to at least have a couple move into it on via the railroads because you blew them up too soon. No, there's no good answer as to when to do that. You just have to look at the pace of your game and how things are going and kind of go, okay, now is the turn I blow things up. Or I blow this up and that up, and then maybe next turn I'll blow that up and that. We'll just have to kind of wait to see how well his combats go. But those are all judgment calls that you're just going to have to make as the game goes on. So, Northern Sea Route may move one naval unit per turn via the Northern Sea Route, both directions. Unit must begin its non-combat movement in Z-Zone 5, 6, or 7. Taking the Northern Sea Route uses all movement, including naval base bonus, may give other nations permission to use this route. So basically, it allows them to get from all the way up here to all the way up here and back and forth. There's a way that they Russia knows how to get through the Arctic up there for 1 unit a turn. So, that's not a terrible idea to use that to move your starting navy over here to this theater up here in the Baltic Sea, as a way of making this navy bigger, and thus Germany is going to have to commit even more resources to taking it out when they initially attack you. On the other hand, you could, move some of the smaller units over here, over to this spot, and then at some point in the game, knowing at some point you're going to kind of move them down and start really harassing Japan at some point, based on how things are going with America and FEC and Anzac down there. I think both are viable. I think moving units from over there to here is a little bit more clear-cut and easily bit more beneficial in the long run, rather than the other way around, because you may never declare war on Japan, but you're going to go to war with Germany. And you don't have to move them here. You could also just keep them up here. You can move your navy from here to here, and just leave it sit there so that Germany can't get it right away, and thus use it later in the game to go after Germany and harass Germany, or help keep that sea route open. It all kind of just depends on what you want to do with that navy. I know most people kind of just leave it there in Sea Zone 16, and again, and like I said before, just force the German player to commit resources to sinking it. Same thing with that fleet down here in the Black Sea. You're probably not going to build any naval units as Russia, for the most part. Now, that's not always true. I have built a transport down here with a Marine just to keep him honest during his invasion over here. Because if he empties out those territories and doesn't do anything about this fleet with his Luftwaffe, because the Romanian Navy is almost non-existent, then it's like, okay, well, I guess I'll go ahead and just take Romania from you, and then Bulgaria, and really kind of make you have to slog back there and take it, just as a harassment option on my part. But I'm not, and I'm not even saying that's a good idea. It's something I've tried out. It's worked in Axis and Allies. I'm still, I don't know that it will work as well here. But on the other hand, even that transport here makes him go, well, I've got to commit some units here that aren't invading Russia this turn, and maybe I'll get lucky and maybe I'll get lucky as the Russians and take out some of his aircraft. It just sort of depends. But that's kind of how I feel about and I kind of went diverge there into a tactic with the Russian Navy, because we were talking about the Northern Sea Route rather than the other Soviet special abilities. But that's kind of how I think I look at the navies, is they're usually there just to kind of stymie the Russian, or the German and Italian advance into Russia. But I know there are other options with them. You could move them around the board and get them to safety, and then use them later in the game to counterattack. Whether that's a better option, I don't know. I think that one is definitely open to some debate and discussion. But okay, let's move on. German surprise attack. Now, it says Soviet special abilities. This is not a Soviet special ability. This is a German special ability. It's just reprinted here as a way of reminding the Russian player, hey, you're going to get screwed when Germany attacks you. So, and I went into that in the German video. I'm not going to go into it here again. It also talks about Tanatuva and Spain and stuff like that. That's more Spanish Civil War, and Tanatuva is that one territory over here, and basically it just joins Russia right off the bat. It doesn't really do much more beyond that, and it doesn't get scored as a victory point or anything like that. So it's like, okay. Then we have, let's see, with the last one, and one of the cooler ones, is mobilize the reserves. In the first production phase after USSR is at war with a major power, all land units cost -1 IPP. Now, knowing that one is coming, you might consider saving up some money as Russia, so that you can make it go farther during that turn. Now, keeping in mind, you don't start the game with a huge economy. You don't start with a huge military in relation to the sheer size of your country. Yeah, if you added it all up, it's not paltry, but when you see that all those units get spread out over all those land territories, you realize just how thinly spread they are, and it's very hard to, you're like, okay, well, anybody could kind of roll right through me at this point. And only getting those 8 IPP for several turns at the beginning of the game, and not being able to really build up a strong kind of defense from the beginning, you are at this point where you're going to have to go, okay, do I spend the units now, or do I build the units now, or do I save some for later for maximizing that? The problem is, if you don't build up your army enough before Germany attacks, are you going to be able to really put enough on the board the turn after they attack to really stymie them? And maybe not. Now, militia are only going to cost 1, but you can only put so many militia in a territory. So you may go, oh, I'm going to just put militia all over. That's okay, but remember, you're only putting 3 here in Kiev, 1 here in Ukraine, 2 here in Orol, and pretty soon you realize, okay, well, I put out a lot of militia, but they're all spread out all over the place. And then you're still limited by what your factory capacity is. So now you're kind of like, oh, okay, well, I put out a bunch of militia, but you can still only put out, assuming you haven't upgraded them, 1 unit here, 1 unit here, 5 units here, 5 units here, 1 unit here, 1 unit, you still have to kind of think about what your overall production capacity is and the ability to put the units into the field. So saving up a ton of money to maximize that may not actually yield the kind of benefits you want. You are going to have to kind of build up ahead of time. And the real thing that I like to think about when I'm building up is I'm only allowed 1 counterattack. So what do I want to counterattack with? And that's when I basically start thinking, okay, well, I know Germany's going to blitz into here and into a bunch of these territories, and they're going to take all these border territories right away. And if they're roughly in this area, where do I want my counterattack units to be set up? Now, Moscow is obviously a pretty decent choice. You can go 1-2, 1-2, 1-2. Don Manek is another one, 1-2. Donetsk Kurban is another one, 1-2. And I start building up kind of a core of units, fast-moving units here in these kind of back areas in a way that I can go, okay, well, now which one of these areas can I counterattack if I'm going to counterattack, and have these units kind of collapse into one area and do as much counter damage as possible. And you don't have to. That's just kind of how I look at it. So I will build some light armor. I will build some mechanized infantry and artillery to tow with it. I will like to build an AA gun or so to go with it. I might build some cavalry to go with it. I also, because Russia starts with a air transport, I will always have at least 1 airborne unit out there ready to roll, just so I can use that airborne, or just so I can use that air transport, other than transporting a unit around the map. So it's you have to build in a mindset of, you have to stop the German advance, but you cannot let them call all the shots and just hope you're going to roll well on the defense and wear them down. You want to roll good on the defense and wear them down, but you want to be able to have counterattack options at the same time. So, what that ratio is of infantry versus militia versus light armor, medium armor, heavy armor, artillery and self-propelled artillery and air force and all that is that's really, again, that's going to depend on you and your play style, what you're comfortable with, what some of the what your opponents are doing, and you're just going to have to kind of make a judgment call. But don't think that Russia in this game should be nothing but stacks of infantry. I think that's a huge mistake, because you need to keep because number one, huge stacks of infantry are okay. They give you plenty of defense. They soak up hits, but you still want some good hard-hitting units behind that infantry in the form of, heavy armor or some artillery pieces or fighters rising up, so that every round you're scoring you're making sure you're not relying on just a handful of low chance dice to hit, but you're getting a couple hits every turn, and that'll grind away the hopefully grind away the German units turn after turn after turn. So you can't, because I know in other, like in A&A, people just kind of build stacks of infantry and stacks of infantry and stacks of infantry, and maybe on that first wave, sure, get the guys out there, but you've got to at the same time leave your options open for a counterattack. And not just on this front. At some point, you may want to go ahead and you may want to attack Japan and, really put some pressure on them at that point. You may want to start, going once you stabilize this front, maybe now you can swing some of those offensive units up here and knock out Finland from the war, and maybe even keep going and really rack up those territories to score those victory points. So don't limit yourself to thinking you have to do nothing but defend as Russia. I don't feel that's the right, excuse me, I don't think that's the best way to think about them. You want to leave you want to have a good mix of units. But at the same, you need to stabilize and then start planning your counterattack is the way I think about it. Now, that said about counterattack, the one other thing I want to kind of bring up real quick is their special unit, which is the Katyusha rocket artillery. Let's see, only for Russia, once Russia has advanced artillery, it has first strike, pair with infantry class as artillery, or pair with medium or heavy armor to blitz. Attrition attack against adjacent land zone at 1d12 at 2. Now, Katyushas, yes, I'll take 2. Unfortunately, that's all you can build per turn is 2, so that's it. I'll take 2 and that's it. Now, it's basically self-propelled artillery, but better, because it has everything that a self-propelled artillery has, but then it has an attack value of 5. That's at first strike. As far as I know, there's no other unit in the game that has a first strike at 5. That's really awesome. So yeah, if you can swing building Katyushas every turn, 2 of them, that goes a long way for your counterattack. So yeah, they have a very good special unit in that right there. So kind of, I went over some of the kind of core considerations with Russia already. You've got to figure out how you're going to spend that meager income at the beginning. Save it. Just kind of, you're going to loan it out to Spain. You're going to build some infrastructure. You're going to build a unit here or there. And I think with experience, you'll kind of go where the key points of defense are and maybe start beefing them up. But then, are you going to sign the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, signing the non-aggression pact with Japan, which basically means you just agree to stop attacking each other. There's really not much to it. I didn't go into it specifically, but there's really not much to it beyond that. And then thinking in the long term in terms of what your tech is and your victory conditions are, and thinking that, you don't have to just be do this mindless defense with Russia. It's not just a wall of guys. There's plenty of other units out there. There's plenty of other ways you can build up a force for it to counterattack and really stymie the Germans. Because I really do think that if you just build nothing but militia and infantry, they're just going to chew you up. Because they're going to be calling the shots, basically. So that's my take on Russia. There's a, and with any of these nations, there's a lot more specific things to talk about. Like I said, this is a basic primer, and I'm going to go over more specific topics in other videos. But for new players, especially like with that Russian, the way they declare war, that's something really worth knowing from the get-go about that it's very different for them, and that you have that option and can take it if it opens up to you. So if there's anything that anybody thinks I missed or would need to clarify, please leave a comment below. And so right now, that's going to be Wintermute signing off. The next country we're going to go into is Japan. There we go. That's better. Japan. Wintermute signing off.